My name is Tobin. I'm standing here at the foothills of the Rocky Mountains in Colorado Springs, Colorado. About 9 years ago, there was a large fire called the Waldo Canyon Fire. It was one of the largest fires in the history of Colorado. You can see the burn scar here behind me. Today we'll be looking at the impacts of wildfires such as this in the American West and how they can impact water quality, water quantity, and water equity. Although the intensity and the frequency of fires in the American West has been increasing since the early 1980s, this is actually a historically low period for fire intensity and frequency of fires, as well as total acreage of burn. Now, during the post-war movement, due to increases in firefighting capacity, new developments in firefighting techniques such as aerial coverage, lots of infrastructure additions, and a general consensus of the American public due to programs such as Smokey the Bear, there was a great reduction in the amount of wildfires until the 1980s. Now in the 1980s, due to an increase of housing in the American West, as well as climate change issues, the amount of wildfires started to increase due to drier areas, more pressure on the water system, and homes closer to forests. Now that trend is projected to only increase. Due to this increase in frequency and intensity of fires, we need to take a more deep look into the issues that wildfires have on water quality, quantity, and equity. Now the impacts on water quality from wildfires in the American West are actually, the impacts are not very common during the fires. It's the time after the fire, the weeks, months, and years post-fire. Some of the impacts include heavy ash in the water, increased metal, very low dissolved oxygen, and increased conductivity. These can have significant downstream impacts due to the impact on water quality in rivers, lakes, and reservoirs. This can cause large bills for utilities downstream in large cities such as Denver, Colorado Springs, Santa Fe, or Flagstaff. Now looking at the impacts that wildfires have on water quantity, there are really three main aspects we need to look at. We need to look at the changes to the water cycle due to less infiltration and less snowpack, erosion at reservoirs and lakes, and flooding issues post-fire. Now that first issue was changes in water quantity due to the reduction in infiltration, and that's due to the destruction of the soil and natural cover that helps the soil absorb moisture. Erosion can be a big impact on surface waters, such as lakes, reservoirs, and rivers. This erosion can decrease the amount of storage capacity that these reservoirs, lakes, and rivers can have. One of the issues leading into this is that many of the dams in the American West were constructed in the post-war years during a low fire period and a high moisture period. So this has created a disparity in the projections of water quantity available to these watersheds. The final issue around water quantity after wildfires is the issue of flooding. The reduction in infiltration allows water to flow over the top of the soil, and it can cause really damaging flash floods, especially in the American West where much of the landscape is mountainous with steep terrain. This can lead to severe flash flooding, such as the flooding that happened at Manitou Springs in 2013, a year after the Waldo Canyon fire. Wildfires such as the Waldo Canyon fire can have great impacts on the water equity of a region. Some of the impacts are due to evacuations caused by the wildfires. Evacuations of homes in the Waldo Canyon fire meant that 32,000 people had to leave their homes. This can cause a strain on the water system and can cause people to resort to using alternative water sources such as bottled water. There's also the impact of abandoning maintenance facilities such as the water storage container here behind me. These evacuations can also impact reservoirs and diversions, which can impact the access of municipalities that they have to surface water sources such as reservoirs and rivers. Other impacts on water equity from wildfires are desertification. You can see the potential for that behind me. Even 9 years after the fire, there's still significant amounts of impacts on the soil and non-native species regrowth. Now looking forward, as projections show that fires will only continue to increase, we need to to look at ways we can mitigate future effects of flooding, impacts on reservoirs, and downstream water operations. Some effective means of mitigation from water impacts from fire include better hydrological modeling, which allows us to predict when and where flooding will happen in the future after fires. We can also emphasize plant and tree regrowth in the burn area, as well as around impacted areas from erosion due to the increased flow in creeks and streams and erosion near reservoirs. Better fire management practices will also be key in reducing the impacts on our water quality, quantity, and equity. These improved fire management practices include allowing controlled burns and low-intensity burns at a higher frequency and managing them a little bit more slowly. This also includes reducing the amount of development in high-intensity, low-frequency burn areas. Currently, about a third of the population of the United States West is in or near forest land. Finally, we need to mimic nature to protect our downstream resources and operations. Behind me we have a retention pond and a naturally mimicked stream that allows floodwaters to dissipate more slowly, reducing the impacts downstream.
In the end, wildfires will continue in the American West due to climate change in an already dry climate. We can take steps to reduce the intensity of fires and protect our water sources, as well as providing protection from floods.